military parades. Let's take a look what they have been putting up with.
Russia has historically had one of the world's most impressive military parades. Since the end of World War II, the Russian military has marched every year at Red Square in the capital, Moscow. On May 9th this year, Russia celebrated the 64th anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany. About 9,000 soldiers and officers participated in the parade, and 69 aircraft flew over the capital. France's Bastille Day is characterized by a massive military parade every year. It is traditionally an international affair, with French troops marching alongside their foreign counterparts in the parade. This year, German and Indian troops joined the Bastille Day parade. The parade opened with 9 Alpha jets of the French patrol. The squadron flew in a V pattern, emitting a tricolored flag with smoke generators. Modern French military units marched down the Champs-Élysées. French President Nicolas Sarkozy revealed a parade of thousands of men and hundreds of military vehicles. Across the English Channel, the United Kingdom's military parade is renowned for its display of pomp and ceremony. Britain's armed forces paraded to celebrate Queen Elizabeth's birthday. Nearly 1,500 soldiers marched in traditional uniforms of the Household Cavalry, Royal Horse Artillery, and Foot Guards. More than 400 musicians from 10 bands kept the beat alongside the famous drum horses of the mounted bands.
Well, let's come back to our own military parade, the military parade of the People's Republic. That has to go back 6 decades when China, the People's Republic of China was founded. The first military parade of the People's Republic was actually conducted on Tiananmen Square. Back then, things were totally different because most of the equipment were taken over from Japanese or other troops. What is the situation back then?
Yes, I think that has a lot to do with Chinese history. As everybody knows, Chinese military developed from a farmer's background. So we virtually could not produce any weapons of significance before liberation. So all that we have are those we have taken from the enemies. So that is the case with the first parade on the establishment of People's Republic of China. That is what we can only see. But things have, of course, changed a lot since then.
So how is the equipment industry developing over the past 2 years, General Zhu, inside the People's Republic?
Actually, after the 60 years of development, the Chinese defense industry have developed a whole series of industries which is capable of making any sort of advanced or sophisticated weapons at home.
And actually, the defense minister said China's military now possesses most of the sophisticated weapons, including the J-10 fighter, submarines, the latest generation of tanks. Do you think it is commensurate with the China's general national power?
Yes, of course. I think the sophisticated weapon systems is a very important component part of the national power or a comprehensive national strength. We are now possessing almost everything that the advanced countries are possessing.
And 60 years ago, when China, the People's Republic was founded, we had a little foundation to start with. So what did the creation of the People's Republic mean for this people?
Well, nowadays, looking back at the history, I think the founding of the People's Republic was there are many ways to look at the significance. It was a new beginning in the sense that it began to provide a stable government for China. This has been missing for China for the previous, say, 100 years, especially as most of the Chinese history from the Opium War that started in 1840. That was decades after decades of chaos. So that has been the single most significant contribution to the development of the Chinese nation, the race, that is to say the founding of the People's Republic 60 years ago on this day, started to provide a stable government that started to offer effective governance of this land.
And also, before 1949, for almost 100 years, China has been troubled with foreign invasion or aggression.
Exactly. Then that's also why I think we need to think about military strength. That is to say, we have a Chinese saying that says "居安思危." That is to say, you don't necessarily have a war on the horizon that's immediate threat, but nevertheless you have to think about the rainy days. In other words, military hardware, especially the training of soldiers, are a must.
That's the starting point of the People's Republic. 60 years ago, the People's Republic of China was born, opening a new chapter of history in the world's oldest civilization. And now, let's look back at 60 years ago when the People's Republic was created.
After 8 hard years of fierce fighting, China achieved a victory in the war of resistance against the Japanese aggression on August 15, 1945. Under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the people then engaged in a tremendous struggle with the ruling Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, over what kind of state should then be built. Regardless of strong public desires for peace, democracy, and unity, the Kuomintang government broke a previously negotiated truce treaty and political consultation conference resolution. It then waged an all-out civil war, persecuting and oppressing members of democratic parties. The Communist Party of China stood up to the Kuomintang and rallied its forces. Politically, the CPC organized and led a Democratic United Front. Economically, it protected national industry and business. Eventually, over the course of the ensuing 3 years, the CPC, with the support of the Chinese people, won the civil war. On September 21, 1949, the first session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference was held. Representatives, including the CPC, democratic parties, and those with no party affiliation, took part. The session proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China. The new nation's founding ceremony took place at Tiananmen Square on October 1, 1949.
Well, that's 60 years ago when the People's Republic was created. Actually, the first generation of Chinese leaders met such a question. They are not the rule followers, they are the rule makers. They have to start from scratches. What is the challenges facing them back then, 60 years ago?
There was no rule. Every rule had to be made. I think, as many people will recall, this was a country that was very chaotic, and in some. Most statistics will tell you, even in the urban areas of China in those days, you had some 85% of illiteracy rate. So they had to start everything from scratch. And in that connection, I would say the creation of, say, some symbols, what we call icons in political management.
Yes. A lot of things were actually discussed in the framework of what we call the political consultative conference system.
That's right.
Because back then we don't have a National People's Congress in place.
Right.
That's where the CPPCC is doing its work.
That's right. This year, I believe some of our viewers, especially those in China, will be introduced to a film that
建国大业 in Chinese, the building of a republic.
That episode of history, I heard it's generating good ticket sales.
Well, its box office is almost 300 million yuan.
One of the most phenomenal things. And out of that conference, one of the things that was decided was to designate the design of a national flag, and also to identify a song that really originated in the movie that was meant to boost morale for the general populace, going back to the 1930s.
Yeah.
That song later on, of course, after amendments, became the national anthem of the country. As is true with this nation building in all countries, people rally behind some symbols. In our country, the Tiananmen Square, especially the tower, being one. Second one is the national flag, of course, the national anthem.
Yes. And from then on, the national identity was established.
Right.
And now let's take a look at the two national symbols, the national flag and the national anthem. And for the Chinese, of course, it is the 5-star flag and it's the March of the Volunteers. Let's take a look.
When the People's Republic was born on October 1st, 1949, Chairman Mao Zedong raised the 5-star red flag over Tiananmen Square. Some 300,000 people were present for the debut of the national flag and national anthem. A committee had been set up to collect design ideas. Almost 3,000 designs were submitted for the national flag. In the end, it was a Zhenglian songs that carried the day. The red background stands for the revolution, while the yellow stands for brightness and skin color of the Chinese people. The big star symbolizes the leadership of the Communist Party of China, and the 4 smaller stars represent the 4 classes of the Chinese people united under that leadership. Meanwhile, after rounds of discussions, the committee selected the national anthem.
我们采用这个代替我们现在还没有的故宫，同时要鼓舞我们把革命进行到底，鼓舞我们的前人所人民人民的。
The song was originally written in 1935 to honor soldiers and revolutionaries fighting the Japanese invaders in northeast China. It was originally the theme song for a film. The lyrics were written by Tian Han and music by Nie Er. After the first flag raising, the job was handed over to Hu Qijun from the Beijing Electric Power Company. In the 1970s, soldiers of the Beijing garrison took over the task. In 1991, changes were added to the flag-raising ceremony. 36 honor guards raised the flag in 2 minutes and 7 seconds, the time it takes for the sun to rise above the horizon. Now, every morning, the 5-star red flag rises at Tiananmen Square to the March of the Volunteers. The event attracts thousands of people from around the country.
You're watching CCTV International. You can also log on to our website, english.cctv.com. And also, you can send your comments to our email address at cctv9@cctv.com. Stay tuned with us throughout the day for our special coverage. Well, by far, we have 13 military parades in the history of the People's Republic, and this year we have the 14th military parade. Among all those parades, 3 will be the most important ones. For an explanation on why is that, let's turn to my colleague Liu Xin again. Liu Xin.
Thank you very much, Soya, and hello again from me. And I have the honor to take you back in time to review some of the most significant military parades in contemporary China's history. And we are going to talk about 3 military parades. To start with, we're going to talk about the 1984 military parade. That was the first parade taken after a 25-year break. And the first military parade since the reform and opening up policy was initiated. Well, something special about that military parade was it had altogether 42 formations, including air echelons, and all the 28 types of new weapons and equipment displayed were produced by China, and 19 of them had reached a world's advanced level. And China's strategic missiles also made its debut, capturing the world's imagination. All in all, that military parade was a concentrated display of the PLA's efforts to build itself into a modern and standardized army. And 15 years later, we move on to the 1999 military parade, marking the 50th anniversary of the People's Republic. That military parade was marked by one word: largesse, scale. It was the biggest military parade in China's history. Altogether, 11,000 troops, 52 formations, including 10 air echelons, 17 formations on foot, and 25 mechanized troops. 42 types of new weapons were displayed, and among them only 2 had been displayed back in 1984. And several divisions made their appearance for the first time as well, including the Army Aviation and Marine Corps, as well as the female militia dressed in bright red. They captured the world's attention. In all, Chinese-made high-tech weaponry was the star of that military parade. And very soon, 10 years later, we have come to this year's military parade, which is just 1 hour away. So what will be the highlights of this year's parade? I have some clues for you. Now, this year we'll have 56 formations, including air echelons. The number 56 is very obvious, the number of China's ethnic groups. Now, altogether, 52 new types of weapon will be showcased, and mind the number of formations are different as well. The formations of arrays on foot has been reduced from 17 to 14, while the number of formations mechanized and on motor has been increased from 25 to 30, and the number of air echelons has been increased from 10 to 12. From that, you can see the development of China's military reform. Anyway, this is going to be a fantastic event, once-in-a-lifetime experience, not to be missed by military aficionados as well as for the ordinary people. And you're watching CCTV International. Our special program continues right after this.
My colleague Liu Xin has talked about the 3 major military parades in the history of the People's Republic. How is the military parade developing over the past 6 decades? We have seen the 1941, 49, and 1984, and 1999, and now 2009.
Well, Chinese military parade compared to some European countries, I would say, are less frequent in that we do not hold it annually.
But in the beginning of the Republic,
yes.
10 years we have
Yes, 10 years we have an annual parade, and then because of the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, we virtually, as Liu Xin have said, stopped it for 25 years. But I think what is most remarkable about the Chinese military parade is that it always corresponds with some historical period. And the most impressive ones are those reviewed by the 4th-generation Chinese leaders, namely by Chairman Mao in 1949, and by Chairman Deng Xiaoping in 1984, and by President Jiang Zemin in 1999, and of course this one by President Hu Jintao. So it echoes a historical period, and since it comes after quite some time, therefore it will be major, grandiose, concentrated performance in which people may have a very good chance to see for themselves how China has really progressed in terms of military development and modernization.
What is the highlight of this year's military parade? Many people are expecting a lot of third-generation equipment, weapon, hardwares. What is the highlights we can look at?
Well, the highlights would be many because, as we have read, actually most of there would be 52 types of new weaponry and equipment. They would be all made in China, and they would, of course, cover all the 3 services plus the second artillery and even the armed police, the reserve forces, etc.
Actually, the organizers and the participants in the massive National Day Parade have made a long preparation for this event. They have already held 4 rehearsals in Tiananmen Square, and the first took place actually roughly a month ago. It featured separate exercises for the mass pageant, human mosaic formations, part of the evening gala, and a military review. A week later, a second rehearsal was staged with a joint exercise of different elements, and the third round in September, the 18th, was dedicated to a complete event. And that last round, which featured joint rehearsals, was held about 10 days ago, 10 days of the actual celebrations. That's the preparation work for the celebration. And all those preparations was to pave the way for the final military parade. Colonel Zhou has just mentioned some of the highlights. So what is your evaluation of Chinese weapon hardware we have seen this time?
As General Liang Guanli mentioned that China is possessing all advanced weapons that the advanced countries in the West are possessing. For example, in the Army, we have the T-99 type of tank, which is quite advanced. It should be the 3rd generation tank. For the Air Force, we have F-10, yeah.
Fighter plane.
Yeah, fighter plane. This is the homemade, and it's the 3rd generation.
Why
fighter.
is it so important we have all those weapons homemade?
Because, as you know, a country like China, which is so big, it is impossible for us to place our hope of security on the others. And if you take into consideration the political system differences of ideologies and also the rising positions of China in the world, many people are very curious about China or very suspicious about China. So it is impossible for us to import all the advanced technologies from outside. Even they are willing to provide this sort of technologies to us. But I don't think we can afford to buy all those advanced technologies from outside.
And for a big power with 1.3 billion people, it must rely on itself for national defense.
Of course.
And for example, let's talk about the equipment. The J-10, we say this is a new generation of fighter, it's the 3rd generation. But what is the significance, what is the undertone of 3rd generation weapons?
Well, right now we have actually 4 generations of aircraft. They have many different features, but there are some prominent ones. For example, if we talk about the 1st generation aircraft, we normally talk about subsonic aircraft. And for the 2nd generation, we talk about supersonic. For the 3rd generation, it's not only supersonic, but it has multiple functions. It has much stronger fire control. It can attack the targets on ground, and its capability of launching missiles beyond the visual range is one of its prominent features. That means, well, in the past, we stressed very much on the eyesight of a pilot, but nowadays, the distance is so far that you virtually target your enemy aircraft on your scan and then fire the missiles.
So this J-10 fighter is actually a typical example of the third generation attack planes.
That's true.
And how about the 99 tanks?
99?
The Type 99 tanks of the infantry.
Oh, the 99 tanks is also considered a third generation main battle tank. It is very much comparable to the most advanced tank in the world. And we're very much proud of that. Yes, I have seen the real tank, and the latest one even have a certain capability of counter chemical weapon and nuclear weapon capabilities. The loading is automatic, and it can fire non-stop. Because previously the tops have to stop and then fire. But then with this
and fire.
Yes, and with this kind of a third generation tank, it virtually can fire while it is in movement, and that requires great stability of the tank itself, because it is in the movement.
And you're watching CCTV International, covering on the 60th anniversary of the People's Republic. We are almost 40 minutes short of the military parade, which will take place on Tiananmen Square. For what the military parade is all about and how the troops will move, let's turn again to my colleague Liu Xin for an explanation. Liu Xin.
Thank you very much, Zhou Yue. Well, I'm not going to talk so much about how the parade will move, but rather how the soldiers have been trained. Indeed, to hold a mass military parade every 5 to 10 years is a tradition set in the early days of the People's Republic. And for the tens of 10,000 or so military servicemen to be able to take part in this grand military parade is indeed a lifetime opportunity. So it is also their opportunity to give a very big gift to their nation, and they are going to give nothing short of a perfect experience. That is why they have undergone months of very strenuous trainings. Here are some pictures just to give you a highlight of what they have been going through. Now, you can see this is quite unbelievable if you look at the pictures. These lines are not drawn onto the pictures, but actual lines that are used to form a net so that the soldiers can stand in exactly the same position.
Yes, indeed. If there is anywhere in the world seeking perfection, the Chinese military marching in parade is seeking perfection. They are the perfectionists. They leave nothing to chances, and they train and train until they are the perfect marching soldiers.
Yes, well, they are not going to be satisfied with any mistakes or errors. For instance, from this picture, you can see the way how they are supposed to turn their head when they are marching past the Tiananmen Gate. They're all supposed to turn at exactly the same angle. And even for the infantry on foot, how they hold their guns is meticulously adjusted by the officers.
Yes, indeed. These soldiers are training for, on average, more than 1 year, on a daily basis without any interruption until they become the perfection itself.
Yes, and even while the soldiers are greeting the leaders, reviewing the troops, they have to yell in one voice. So even that is practiced as well. And the most important part of the military parade is, of course, the steps.
Yes, indeed. Liu Xin, I think the other impressive thing is that these soldiers are normally only 18 or 19 or 20 years old. They were born, mostly in the 80s, but many of them are also born after 1990. So in China, we call them the new generation, the younger generation, representing the future of China.
But they also had the kind of slight derogatory symbol of being more lazy, more, less disciplined. However, through this military parade, we can see the potential in those younger generation of soldiers. But the point here I want to show with this picture is the exact length, the exact measure of each step is exactly 75 centimeters. And their feet is supposed to be 30 centimeters above ground. And everybody has to do that thousands of times. Kilometers they have to practice for only 98 meters from while they were marching in front of the Tiananmen Gate. That's
128 steps.
128 steps, but months of training, and sometimes they have to use some special methods to train the soldiers' muscles on their legs.
Yes, indeed. When the military parade begins at 10 o'clock, the soldiers in marching formation will march across from the Tiananmen Square. And in between the two columns with the fortune cloud on top of them,
the two Huabiao columns,
the two Huabiao in Chinese, they need to march total distance, as Liu Xing mentioned, 96 meters in 128 steps. But they have been training on a daily basis more than 10 hours a day, more than 30 kilometers a day for more than 1 year. That means they have already covered a total of more than 10,000 kilometers, which will be more or less the distance between Beijing and New York.
Wow, so this parade must be fantastic. Now, one of the new features of this year's parade is China's special forces. They are very mysterious in the people's eyes because they have kept a relatively very low profile. This force has actually been established since the 1980s, and they're trained, as the name indicates, for special operations such as unconventional warfare or an emergency situation or terrorist attacks and stuff like that. So from the pictures, this is how they look like, the Chinese camouflaged soldiers. Of course, today they will not be in this kind of condition. This is, again, Chinese special forces, but they have been kept a very low profile.
And the training for these special troops for the military parade actually is particularly difficult. This is mainly because their style of warfare is required to be, very stealthy, very secretive, and they are trained not to march in marching formations, but highly individualistic. Therefore, I think it will require a very complete reversal of their normal training as special troops in order to retrain themselves into the role of marching soldiers in order to participate in the military parade this time.
Yeah, but the special forces are famous for their indomitable will, so they will overcome the difficulties, and we can expect a fantastic performance from them as well. Now, we talked about fighter planes, attack planes, and another highlight of this year's military parade is female fighter pilots. This is a first time in China's history that female fighter pilots will be flying over Tiananmen Square in the National Day Parade. Now, altogether, in China, we have 16 female fighter pilots, and here is a group picture of all of them. Indeed, the pride of the nation, the pride of Chinese women as well. But why do we need to have female fighter pilots?
Well, China is only one of the 7 countries in the world which has female fighter pilots. Yes. And I think this is very important to represent the fact that female as well as male are very important in national defense, and women actually can play an equally important role in defending their own motherland. And traditionally in Chinese, there have been very important female heroes who had contributed a great deal to the defending of the motherland. Therefore, I think training these female fighter pilots is important to represent the new wave of the Chinese women who want to go through as strenuous training as the male counterparts in order to fly the fighter planes and train themselves to be ready to defend the country whenever it is necessary.
Yes, another interesting thing about these female fighter pilots, they graduated from the same academy as the Shenzhou 7 astronauts, Zhai Zhigang and Liu Boming. So very likely in the future, we might have some female taikonauts emerging from the first group of female fighter pilots. So we are looking forward to that. That's going to take another few years. Well, again, here is the handsome, very beautiful J-10 that Zoe was talking about today. It will be making its debut among the 12 flying echelons. However, they're going to pass over the Tiananmen Square so fast that it might be a little bit difficult to recognize them. Now, finally, the female fighter pilots will be the last flying echelon, and they will be flying the trainer planes, and they will have the opportunity to draw smoke above the Tiananmen Square. Now, this is relatively fancier compared to what we can see today, because the air show today that's going to take place above very important residential areas in the heart of Beijing. So we are not going to see fantastic fancy air maneuvers, but rather more meticulous coordination is required.
I was told that in order to be more environmentally friendly, the planes are actually using vegetable oil to draw the smoke as a demonstration. This will make sure that less pollution will be created as a result of the planes flying above the Tiananmen Square.
Indeed, this will be a military parade for the 21st century with environmentally friendly consciousness. Anyway, that's a quick explanation of the highlights to be expected during this year's military parade. And you're watching CCTV International. Our live coverage continues right after this.
We're talking about the training of the soldiers for this military parade. It must be a very hard and exhausting exercise for those soldiers and officers.
Yes, of course it will be, because, well, I think this is very much Chinese in that for such a grandiose military parade, we have to make sure that everything is impeccable and flawless. Therefore, all the formations got to move actually like one. This requires, of course, a long time training and a lot of hardship that the soldier have to render. Yeah.
And also, people are talking about, we are now facing financial crisis. At this particular time, China is putting up a largest military parade ever. So it is appropriate to have such a military parade at this particular time.
Well, I think money always matters, yeah, as is the case with everybody. But the thing is whether you spend money in a significant way or not. In China's case, because we do not hold such a parade annually, and it comes to coincide with a great historical achievement that our military have scored. Therefore, we believe it is worthwhile. But on the other hand, we have also done a lot of things to try to make it economical. Yeah, that's what we always call to build up our military through frugality. A lot of measures are taken. For example, this time they are more concentrated in what we call parade villages. And so people actually live and train there together. And they do not buy any new equipment just for showcasing the military, but they would rather use what they already have or those already deployed with the troops. There are quite a number of significant measures to make it economical.
General Zhu, we have such a military hardware. Do we need to have such a military hardware in the first place? I mean, with a rising power such as China, what kind of military power should we have in face of the security threats that we will face?
I think if you look at the major countries in the world, I believe the security environment of China is the most complicated one. We are facing not only challenges, but also a series of threats. So to counter these threats and challenges, I think China needs advanced and sophisticated weapons and weapon systems. Otherwise, its security cannot be secured or cannot be guaranteed.
So the Chinese position on its security situation is that we are for offensive.
No,
defensive.
We are for defensive.
Yes.
Yes.
So we are generally a defensive strategies.
Yes. Well, I think such a kind of strategy or policy is adopted by many countries. But in the case of China, we must stick to some fundamental principles. The first one is our 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And the second is our new security concept, which we have put forward in recent years, which features mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, and cooperation. And we also have some practical objectives that we have to adhere to in such policies. For example, we do not align ourselves militarily with any countries. And
we do not join any alignment.
No, and that has been the policy for decades, and it's not directed against any third countries. These are the fundamental principles.
So to look at the policy and see if it's defensive or offensive, I think you will have to look at 2 things. One is the posture of the forces. The other is the military behavior. I think if you look at these 2 things from at the military, the PLA of China, you will find China's policy is defensive.
And apart from the military parade, of course, there is also the civilian parade, because many civilian people will join in the parade for this year's celebration. Actually, 4 rounds of rehearsals have been held for the festivities celebrating the 60th anniversary of New China. We have taken a look at many of the 4 rehearsals that civilians have put up. Let's look back at what they've been doing to make this year's celebration a great success.
Creating history through unified performances. Chanting loudly, the massive procession of participants flooded Chang'an Avenue for a full kilometer, moving in giant orderly formations. Tiananmen Square has been decorated just as it will be on the National Day. 56 columns representing ethnic unity flanked the square, and 60 lanterns hovered in the air. The rehearsals featured a massive pageant involving nearly 200,000 citizens and 60 floats, a gala and a military parade. On the theme of Motherland and I marching together, the citizens parade through Tiananmen Square to showcase the country's social, economic and cultural development over the past 6 decades. For the first time, drum dancers from Ansai County of northwest China's Shanxi province took part in the mass pageant for national celebration. The 60 floats represented China's achievements in such fields as science, industry, agriculture, education since 1949. Some 1,500 musicians from across China have been selected for PLA's biggest ever military band to perform music for the military parade and a massive pageant. 80,000 primary and secondary school students flipped cards on cue to form pictures and Chinese characters as a background. Flushed with pride and joy, those participants presented 4 rounds of rehearsals for all the festivities ahead of the big day on October the 1st. For them, National Day is a chance to showcase countless hours of meticulous training before a global audience. Their performance may be only hours long on that day, but they say the honor will last a lifetime.
Well, obviously, a lot of people have made a lot of contributions to this year's military parade and also civilian parade. We've seen the civilians have made their preparations for this year's big event. We recall in 1984 when Deng Xiaoping reviewed the military troops, there was also a civilian parade,
right.
And during the civilian parade, some students from Peking University put up a banner saying, "Hello, Xiaoping," which drawn quite a sensation among the public.
Right. I think nowadays, just a few days ago, I read a paper that by the direct participants who organized this. These faculty and students in our School of Economics at Peking University wanted to use this particular methodology to express their enthusiasm in terms of supporting for the reform program Mr. Deng Xiaoping was putting forward, also in terms of sending out a strong message of civilian willingness to participate in these programs. Civilian parades in this sense, it happens in all other countries as well on these days of significance. So what I see in this is that there are 2 parts of this. One, of course, is that different provinces and different industries are sending, they're forming their own teams to showcase their achievements and their aspiration, their contribution to being part of the nation. And this is extremely important. And secondly, we have both in terms of the real human beings and in terms of artistic representations of the different ethnic groups in this country. That shows how far we have come through. That is to say, people of different ethnic groups, people from all different parts of the country all come together. It's also sending a body message that only by standing united can we move together into the future and face newer rounds of challenges.
Actually, I think the atmosphere and the protocol of the civilian parade have changed a lot.
That's correct,
In the early
yes.
50s and 60s, it is strictly superior and inferior. You look up to the leaders,
right,
and they look down at you. But now it is a more conversational style of exchange.
Exactly. So it's more celebratory, it's more inclusive. Although you might want to say, well, let's make this more spontaneous, a little less organized. But let's also face it, Beijing today is very, very different from Beijing, say, 30, 40 years ago. We have, tripled the total population, and it's very, very difficult to make this free and open, make it spontaneous.
And how do you look at the different municipalities and different regions' willingness to participate in this event? And maybe there is a spirit of competitiveness.
Exactly. There is a spirit of competition. There is a spirit of saying we must put out the best and most representative of the region. And you know, China is a very, very big country, and there are different provinces, different cities, and even among different ethnic groups that are competing for prominence. So this is also a chance for different parts of the country to showcase their uniqueness in this National Day of Significance.
Let's wait for a few while to see what the military parade and the civilian parade will be like. You're watching CCTV International. For our coverage on the China's National Day, please don't forget to log on our website, english.cctv.com. And also, you can send your comments to our email address. Please stay tuned with our CCTV International for our special coverage on the 60th anniversary of the PRC. Well, the military parade and the civilian parade will be a very complicated process. Where it starts and where it ends, it should be a long process. And for that explanation, let's turn again to my colleague Liu Xin. Liu Xin.
Thank you very much, Zhou Yue, and pleasure from me again to give you a quick overview of the parade program. We have a whole set of protocol how the parade will be taking place. Before we talk about that, I'm just going to show you once again an interesting look of the venue of the parade, which is the Chang'an Avenue that's riding from east to west across Tiananmen Square. Now, I am going to open this massive scroll, and you can see the Tiananmen Gate once again. As I mentioned, on top of the tower will be state leaders, military generals reviewing the troops, and on the western and eastern side of the Tiananmen Gate will be viewing stands constructed, permanent viewing stands constructed since the first National Day. However, this time, temporary viewing stands have been added to accommodate more people, more visitors of the parade.
Yes, indeed. The permanent stand actually can accommodate about 4,000 people. But in order to allow more people to witness the military parade and the civilian parade at this very important occasion, temporary standing places have also been created. Altogether, they can accommodate up to 10,000 people this time.
Yes, indeed, it's a parade under a lot of attention. Now, we can take a look at the main gate of the Tiananmen Tower. That is where President Hu Jintao will be coming out riding a domestically produced limousine. He will get a report from the chief commander of the military parade telling him that all the troops are ready to be reviewed. And then he will ride on this limousine and he will go from west to east all the way along the Chang'an Avenue, and along the way we can see some landmark buildings. Behind this red wall, it was the old Imperial Palace and now the Palace Museum. As we can, this is a view of the Chang'an Avenue, and we are going all the way toward the eastern direction. This is the Beijing Hotel, another very important landmark in Beijing where many important state guests are staying. And right east to the Beijing Hotel is a very long traditional shopping district, Wangfujing, and the new complex is the New Oriental Plaza. And I feel so familiar with all this because I drive along this road every day to work. So it's really interesting to give you an overview of that. And you can see the interesting architecture along the Chang'an Avenue. This is the Ministry of Communications, the International Hotel, and some other. This is the Chang'an Theater where traditional Peking opera and other traditional operas will be staged. So this, with that, we have come to the eastern end of the parade route, which is near Jianguomen, the Jianguomen Bridge. That is about 2 to 3 kilometers.
Yes, indeed, because the distance between the Jianguomen gate in the east and the Fuximen gate in the west is a total of approximately 6 kilometers. And this will be the main part of the avenue where the parade will take place.
Yes, so as I said, President Hu Jintao will be riding his limousine from west to east to review the positions standing. And then after he reached the end of the formation, he will ride all the way back toward the Tiananmen Gate. He will mount the Tiananmen rostrum once again. And let's go back to the Tiananmen rostrum. He will mount the structure once again, and then soldiers on foot and motorized mechanized formations will be starting their march past from east to the west, and they will walk another 2 to 3 kilometers all the way along the eastern section, the western section of the Tiananmen Avenue. And let's just take you another tour of the western section of the Chang'anjie of the Tiananmen Square. And this again was the old Forbidden City, the Palace Museum nowadays. And here we will see a very important place for the Chinese leadership, which is the Zhongnanhai.
Indeed, this is the a new China gate leading toward the Zhongnanhai compound, which is the headquarters of the Communist Party of China, as well as the State Council. So this is the very important seat of the Chinese government.
Yes, many people would come and take picture in front of this very beautiful old structure every day. Now, we are moving further west, and we have come to some other buildings left from the 1950s. We can see from the architectural style, this is the Tower of Telegraph. Interesting story about the clock.
Yes, and Liu Xing, this building itself was also completed around the 10th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1959. At that time, China built 10 landmark structures in Beijing, including this one, and also the Great Hall of the People, to mark the 10th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. And today, we are celebrating the 60-year anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic.
How time flies. Now, as I mentioned, this clock is very special because at 10 o'clock sharp, we will hear the East is Red, that very landmark tune sounded from this clock. And we will listen to that. And now we come to the Xidan shopping area. Once again, another very busy shopping area, the Bank of China.
Yes.
And going further south, this is another very interesting building, also left from the early days of the People's Republic, the Palace of the Nationalities. This is where China's national unity is featured, is highlighted. A lot of exhibitions will be taking place here from time to time.
And indeed, as you know, in China we have 56 different ethnic groups or nationalities, as we call them. And today, during the National Day celebration, you will hear the 56, number 56, a lot.
Yes.
For example, the 56 big columns being erected in the Tiananmen Square, 56 formations, etc. These numbers all reflect back to the fact that in China, we're a multi-ethnic country, including 56 nationalities.
But united, we are united.
United as one, yes.
And finally, that was the Mingzu Hotel, and we have come almost to the end of the parade route. That was the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, and this is another shopping district. And with that, we have come to the western end of the parade route. So altogether, 6.4 kilometers.
And incidentally, you know, the city area between the Jianguomen gate in the east and the Fuximen gate in the west, covering a distance of about 6.4 kilometers, was originally the imperial city of Beijing. Outside of these gates, hundreds of years ago, was considered countryside or rural areas. But now the city has really spread out across to a much larger extent, including much more areas than the original imperial city itself.
Yeah, so these sections are considered within the eastern and the western second ring roads. Now we have the third ring roads, we have the fourth ring roads, and even the fifth ring roads within all that area have been pretty much changed and very prosperous. And we talk about the 10里长安, the 10-mile Chang'an-jie, actually only refers to a very small section of the Chang'an-jie, which now spans about 27 kilometers. Anyways, that was a quick look at the parade route and the parade program. I hope you have a better picture of what's coming up, and we are just about 20 minutes away from the military parade this year. Let's all keep a close eye on the things that's coming up, and you're watching CCTV International.
Yes, indeed. Exactly 20 minutes to go before the military parade will unfold on Tiananmen Square. We've seen that the military parade is the highlight of this year's National Day celebration. But talk about the military parade, we must talk about the formation of each individual military unit. What is the formation of a military unit?
Well, I think we have this time, as Mr. Beijing has mentioned, we have 46 formations, out of which we have 34 weaponry and equipment, 14 for people who simply march, and then we have 12 echelons. Yeah, these are the formations.
Well, this style of marching step turning to parade step protocol is borrowing from somewhere?
Yes, I think it comes from Russia, and Russia has learned it from Prussians in history. Yeah, this is how it has come about.
So, General Zhu, do you think this kind of military parade will greatly boost the morale of the soldiers and officers serving in our military?
Yes, of course. I think it's very conducive to the promotion of the training of the troops, and it's also very helpful to the improvement of the morale.